Beneath towering green cliffs, a solitary canoe cuts through frigid waters. The paddler struggles alone with a vessel built for three. He's alone because 8 of his companions have just been captured by strange warriors, men with pale skin, metal weapons that gleam like captured sunlight, and faces hidden behind beards unlike any his people have ever known. This isn't a legend, it's history, and it happened 5 centuries before Columbus ever set sail. When the lone paddler reaches his village, his warning ignites immediate action. A war party assembles, not to explore, but to rescue, to fight. These people have inhabited this land for thousands of years. Their ancestors crossed from Eurasia during the Ice Age, following mammoth herds across a land bridge that no longer exists. For millennia, the 2 hemispheres developed in complete isolation. Empires rose and fell, languages evolved. Entire civilizations flourished on opposite sides of the world, each completely ignorant of the other's existence. Until now, the Vikings of Scandinavia, having terrorized Europe and established footholds in Iceland and Greenland, have just shattered tens of thousands of years of separation between the old world and the new. And their first act? They execute all 8 captives. The Norse raiders are led by Thorvald Eriksen, brother of the famous Leif Erikson. Leif had landed on these shores earlier, but never encountered the indigenous inhabitants. Now, Thorvald faces the consequences of that initial violence, and it will cost him everything. A fleet of canoes materializes on the horizon. The Norsemen scramble behind their ship's hull as a storm of stone-tipped arrows hammers their raised shields. The assault is relentless, coordinated, deadly. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ceases. The natives withdraw into the forest. The Vikings lower their shields, believing they've survived. But victory comes at a price they didn't anticipate. Thorvald Eriksen slumps against the ship's side, a single arrow buried deep in his torso. Blood seeps through his tunic. With his final breaths, he makes an unusual request. Bury him in this foreign land with crosses marking his grave, one at his head, one at his feet. A Christian burial in a pagan world, an ocean away from home. His men honor the request, then flee back to Leif Eriksen's settlement before returning to Greenland come spring. But the Viking story in America wasn't over. Not yet. Soon, distant sounds echo across the water. The clang of iron tools, columns of smoke rising from cook fires. Dragon-proud ships appear on the horizon once more. Thorfinn Karlsefni arrives with nearly 70 settlers, Christians and pagans alike, determined to establish a permanent colony. Fortune seems to favor them when a beached whale provides abundant food for the winter. They construct sod houses and prepare for the brutal months ahead. As spring arrives, figures emerge from the forest. Initially terrified by a bellowing Norse bull, an animal they've never seen, the natives eventually approach cautiously, carrying furs from local animals. Through gestures and broken attempts at communication, they indicate interest in the Vikings' iron weapons. Karlsefni refuses to trade weapons. He's not that foolish. Instead, he offers something the natives have never encountered: milk from livestock. The indigenous people are fascinated by this strange white drink. They trade all their furs for it, then vanish back into the forest. Karlsefni, sensing future trouble, orders a defensive palisade built around the settlement. When the natives return in autumn, greater in number, laden with more furs, tension fills the air like smoke before a fire. During the exchange, one native attempts to seize an iron weapon. A Viking strikes him dead instantly. The others scatter into the forest like shadows, but Karlsefni knows this isn't over. Retaliation is inevitable. He devises a strategy: send warriors into the forest to lure the natives out, then ambush them in brutal close combat. The plan succeeds. Tomahawks and arrows clash against axes and shields. The Vikings scatter their opponents, leaving several bodies among the trees. But this victory feels hollow. The land itself seems hostile now. Karlsefni's group survives one more winter, then makes a decision that will echo through history. They load their ships with American grapes and furs and abandon the settlement forever. These accounts come directly from 2 Icelandic sagas: the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. Both were first written down in the early 1200s. preserving oral histories passed through generations like precious heirlooms. The sagas differ in key details. Erik's saga combines Thorvald and Karlsefni's expeditions into one narrative and describes a massive battle where a fierce Viking woman named Freydís terrifies the attacking natives by beating a sword against her exposed breast, a display of fearlessness that sends them fleeing. But medieval folklore permeates both texts. Reanimated corpses deliver prophecies, disembodied voices guide explorers, and in one version, Thorvald dies from an arrow shot by a one-legged creature. Separating fact from legend becomes nearly impossible. As Viking clans consolidated into kingdoms and Greenland settlements were abandoned, these American expeditions faded into rumor and legend, stories told around hearths on winter nights or carried by traveling merchants across distant lands. By 1340, an Italian monk records garbled tales of Marcolata, a western land of giants who built with massive stone slabs. By 1492, the year Columbus reaches the Bahamas, the Vatican notes that no news from Greenland has arrived in 8 decades. The connection is severed, the memory lost. Scholars doubted Vikings ever reached North America until 1960. That year, in Newfoundland, archaeologists discovered strange mounded ruins. Excavations revealed sod houses, an iron forge, and timber recently carbon-dated to the year 1021. This was Landsok's Meadows, concrete proof that Vikings established a settlement in North America 500 years before Columbus. Evidence suggests they may have launched expeditions as far south as Maine or New York, exploring a coastline that would remain unknown to Europe for another 5 centuries. The indigenous people they encountered were likely ancestors of the Beothuk or Dorset peoples, groups whose fierce resistance may have sealed the fate of these first European colonies in the Americas. The saga of Erik the Red offers this haunting explanation. Although the land was excellent, they could never live there in safety or freedom from fear because of the native inhabitants, so they made ready to leave the place and return home. Think about that. The Vikings, conquerors of Europe, raiders who brought kingdoms to their knees, masters of the sea, were driven back, not by storms or starvation, but by determined warriors defending their homeland. For a few brief years around the year 1000, 2 worlds that had diverged for over 10,000 years collided on North American shores. The Vikings met their match in the indigenous peoples defending their families, their land, their way of life. Unlike the devastating colonization that would follow 500 years later, bringing disease, conquest, and genocide, this first contact ended in stalemate. The Vikings retreated. The land remained in the hands of those who had called it home for millennia. It's a forgotten chapter of history, preserved only in medieval sagas and buried ruins, a reminder that America's story of contact didn't begin with Columbus in 1492, but with anonymous warriors defending their families against armored invaders half a millennium earlier. The Vikings came, they fought, and ultimately, they failed. And for centuries, both sides forgot it ever happened, until archaeologists uncovered the truth buried beneath Canadian soil, proof that the first battle for America was won by those who were already here.